Well, when you hear the Tom Cousins, you think about the man that built Atlanta. You think about a great businessman, a great philanthropist. Nothing that's good that he's not involved in.
A visionary who also is extraordinarily capable of delivering a passion and determination and skill set to actually turn those into reality.
I'm sure there are people who think about him purely as business because he's a very successful businessman. But I think of him about his passion for doing community development and neighborhood development, starting in Eastlake.
We have a long family history in the neighborhood of Eastlake. So my grandparents, Dad's parents, were members of the Atlanta Athletic Club when this was its home course. I have very, very early memories of Eastlake, you know, and it being a beautiful, active, vibrant community.
Going back some decades, Eastlake had been a community that had lost investment. People moved out of the city and moved out of Eastlake when they had a choice, and what was left were people who were really struggling to make ends meet.
Eastlake was by far the worst area in the Atlanta area, and that, in fact, the crime there was higher than anything south of Newark, New Jersey.
I drove over there with him to look at it one time, and I thought, oh my God. It was an area in which you basically needed an armored car.
The crime rate was 18 times the national average. Children were not achieving in school. They were dropping out of high school in greater numbers than graduating.
Tom always has big ideas, and when he first came to me, I thought, gosh, he's crazy.
And I met Tom and Walter Ashmore, his construction person, right out in front of this building. But then he began describing what he wanted to do to the neighborhood and his vision for what this neighborhood would become. I was a bit skeptical, except for Tom Cousins was saying he was going to do it.
And even when I heard about it from Dan Sweat for the first time, I'm like, that's the craziest idea I've ever heard. Not because it wasn't needed, not because it wasn't right, but because it seemed so hard.
He actually can see in his head what it's going to look like. And the rest of us are just always playing catch up.
You want to follow Tom Cousins. You know, you don't go along with his things because you feel roped into it.
People ask me all the time, why did you do this? Why did you take on the neighborhood and so forth? And I said, I don't know, it just come upon me.
The vision from the very beginning was always about bringing a world-class golf event to this golf course.
They first called and wanted and said, congratulations, we're going to put the Nike Tour Championship at Eastlake. And I said, no, you're not. 2 weeks later, Tim Fincham called and said, Tom, how about the Tour Championship? And I said, now you're talking.
When Tom laid out the vision of what would happen there and could happen there, we were compelled and excited about having the opportunity to use PGA Tour golf to tell that story.
He needed somebody who could gather the volunteers and inspire them and lead a phenomenal event and tournament. And who else would you go to in Atlanta but Billy Payne?
You know, when I first met Billy, he was a baby in diapers. Well, his mother and father were friends of ours, and they were having dinner at our house. That's my first acquaintance with Billy Payne as a baby, and I helped his dad change his diapers.
In order to do something like bring the Tour Championship to an inner city community, you need someone that people believe in. Well, if Billy Payne and Tom Cousins said they were going to do something, I knew they would, and I knew it would be spectacular.
After all, How many tournaments have the benefit of having a chairman who's run the Olympic Games?
And I thought, Billy, of anybody I've ever known in my life, here's a guy who's not only a good manager, but he's creative. Billy could just bring not only his wisdom, but he could bring his volunteers with him to handle the tournament.
You know, the similarity they have is they're both visionaries, but visionaries with the ability to deliver.
These are two people who have the same kind of, I would call it Pied Piper, P.T. Barnum personalities in one sense. They have big vision, but they also were very aware that they needed to bring partners along with them and work within the community to make these visions successful.
People follow optimism. No one likes to follow pessimism.
Billy is a great listener, and he listened from the early days. Tom is a real estate developer, so he had learned to listen as well. And they built into the logistics a process by which people felt that they were included.
What they undertook was remarkable, which has become now the most important championship of the year. You have to give them credit for even thinking it up, much less getting it done.
The combined prize is the biggest prize money of any sport in America. Bigger than the Super Bowl, bigger than the World Series.
And they demonstrated that you know, when you think big, you think real big, big things can happen.
Over the last 19 years, over $30 million has been invested back into this community from the Tour Championship. It has funded our early learning programs. There are 450 children a year through our early learning programs. And if you do that exponential number over 20 years, it's just a phenomenal impact.
Low-income people, middle-income people, higher-income people can live in this community and benefit from the assets that are here.
Well, I think that East Lake is a real miracle created by man.
What it's done to the human environment, the life experiences of the residents here and the students at the school, that's the miracle.
Both Tom and Billy understand and have never put themselves out front. They have always wanted this event and this tournament and the work here at East Lake to be about the families in the community.
We are in great debt to these two men for coming together and completing all that. And on behalf of the PGA Tour, I want to thank you.
Billy Payne and Tom Cousins have brought their hearts to East Lake. And their legacy is when you put your heart and your experience together, you'll succeed.
When you talk about Tom Cousins, he's a giant among men. And if you think about Billy Payne, the same thing. A man that can really make it happen, make the impossible happen. So when you think about the two of them together, their legacy will be, these are two men that changed everything about Atlanta, but particularly in bringing the championship to East Lake.